The Silver Serpents thought they ruled Shanghai's underground fashion district without challenge. Their extortion empire had grown from street corner threats to controlling entire industries, leaving a wake of broken businesses and shattered dreams. But on a rain-soaked evening in the heart of the garment district, they made a fatal mistake that would become whispered legend in criminal circles. They targeted Lin Wei's modest tailoring shop. They saw what they wanted to see, a 61-year-old seamstress, working late hours in her small storefront, an easy target for their expanding protection racket. What they couldn't see was the ghost behind her gentle smile. The same ghost that had haunted Japan's criminal underworld for 2 decades as the most lethal blade specialist in Asia's covert operations. The legend they called the Silent Thread, because her targets never saw the stroke that ended them. Now, as the Silver Serpents enforcers approach her shop, Lin Wei is exactly where she wants to be. Because sometimes justice requires patience. Sometimes it takes a master of hidden blades to unravel an empire. And the Silver Serpents are about to learn why hardened criminals still whisper her name in fear. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The neon lights of Shanghai's fashion district painted watercolor reflections in the rain-slicked streets as Lin Wei worked late in her small tailoring shop. Her weathered hands moved with practiced precision across expensive silk, each stitch placed with the same careful attention she'd once used for very different purposes. Through the storefront window, she caught the reflection of 3 men in expensive suits making their third pass of the evening. Silver Serpents. They'd been expanding their territory block by block, pressuring local businesses with escalating demands for protection. Lin noted their movements with professional detachment, her fingers never pausing in their work. The youngest one walked with a slight favor to his left leg, recent injury, probably from enforcement work. The leader carried himself with the distinctive posture of someone trained in traditional martial arts. Amateur mistakes. They were telegraphing too much information. Inside her shop, amongst the racks of fine clothing and rolls of imported fabric, Lin had spent 2 years building her cover. Every detail had been carefully crafted. The slight tremor she affected in her hands when nervous customers haggled over prices. The family photos on the wall, carefully manufactured by former colleagues. The small shrine to a fictitious late husband. The Silver Serpents had been watching her shop for weeks, assessing her as a target. Like all predators, they looked for signs of weakness. Lin's phone buzzed quietly. A message from Chen, her former handler in Taiwan's intelligence. Service, they're moving into position. 3 more teams spotted in the district. Bigger operation than we thought. Lin allowed herself a small smile as she continued her stitching. Of course it was bigger. The Silver Serpents weren't just criminals. They were the public face of something more dangerous. Their protection racket provided cover for money laundering. Their control of shipping routes masked the movement of prohibited goods, and their connections to the fashion industry helped them hide something even more valuable. The bell above her shop door chimed, right on schedule. Madam Lin. The leader's voice carried practiced charm as he entered, flanked by his 2 associates. Working late again? Business must be good. Mr. Zhang. Lin stood slowly, letting them see the arthritic care in her movements. What brings the Silver Serpents to my humble shop at this hour? Zhang smiled, running his hand along a rack of custom-tailored suits. The district is changing, madam. Lin, small businesses like yours need protection in these uncertain times. We're here to offer our services. Lin wrapped her arms around herself, the picture of elderly vulnerability. Through lowered eyes, she noted their positions, their stances, the bulges of concealed weapons beneath expensive jackets. The younger one with the injured leg was nervous, his hand straying too often toward his hidden blade. poor training. In a day, operatives learned to keep their tells hidden. Protection. She let her voice waver. But I don't understand. The police station is just 2 blocks away. Zhang's charm slipped slightly, revealing something colder. The police can't be everywhere, Madam Lin. Accidents happen, fires start, robberies go unsolved. He gestured expansively. But we can ensure your safety for a reasonable monthly fee. Lin shuffled to her workbench, letting them see her hesitation. Every movement was calculated, feeding their assumptions, reinforcing their perception of a vulnerable old woman. Let them think they had control. Let them believe their target was helpless. I'll need time to think about it, she said softly. Of course. Zhang placed a business card on her cutting table. Take 24 hours. Consider it carefully. His smile returned, practiced and predatory. We'd hate to see anything happen to such a refined establishment. As they left, Lin noted how the youngest one lingered, his eyes straying to the antique cabinet behind her workbench. Good. He'd spotted exactly what she'd wanted him to see. The cabinet contained her most precious possessions, or so they would believe. In reality, it was one more piece of carefully crafted misdirection. Lin returned to her stitching as their footsteps faded. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Chen. Confirmed. They're planning to hit 3 other shops. Tonight, testing responses, marking targets. Perfect. Everything was proceeding according to plan. After 2 years of patience, of watching the Silver Serpents operation grow, of tracking their patterns and infiltrating their networks, they had finally made their move. They thought they were the predators, marking an easy target for their protection racket. They didn't realize they had just invited the silent thread to unravel their entire empire. Lin continued her careful stitching as night settled over the fashion district. Soon, the Silver Serpents would return, expecting to find a frightened old woman ready to surrender to their demands. Instead, they would learn why blade masters still used her techniques in training, why criminal empires still warned their enforcers about the silent thread. Sometimes justice was best served by a hidden blade. Sometimes it took a ghost to cut out corruption at its heart. Lin smiled as she completed her final stitch. The real work was about to begin. The midnight air hung, heavy with the scent of rain and incense, as Lin Wei completed her evening routine. To anyone watching through the shop's windows, she appeared to be closing for the night. An old woman carefully folding fabric, checking locks, tending to her small shrine. But each movement served a dual purpose, each seemingly innocent action, part of a carefully choreographed preparation. Movement on Huaihai Road, Chen's message buzzed quietly. 2 teams. They're not being subtle anymore. Lin allowed herself a small smile as she pulled an ancient wooden box from beneath her workbench. To the Silver Serpent's surveillance, it would look like she was preparing to secure her valuables, exactly what they'd expect from a frightened shop owner, anticipating trouble. In reality, she was setting her stage. The box itself was a masterpiece of misdirection, a technique she'd learned decades ago in Taiwan's covert operations. The visible compartment contained jewelry, some cash, papers, items that would draw attention, that would make thieves believe they'd found their prize. But beneath, Lin's fingers moved across the box's surface with practiced precision, finding pressure points invisible to the untrained eye. In her prime, she'd been known for turning everyday objects into weapons, for hiding lethal surprises in plain sight. The intelligence community had called it the Seamstress technique, though few knew the term's true origin. Her phone buzzed again. Confirmed target list acquired, Chen reported. They're hitting 6 shops tonight. Yours is last. They're sending their cleanup team. Cleanup team. Lin's hands paused briefly on the box. That confirmed her suspicions. The Silver Serpents weren't just extorting local businesses. They were eliminating specific targets, using their protection, racket as cover for something larger. Just like in Singapore 15 years ago, when another criminal organization had used fashion districts to mask their true operations. Through her shop windows, Lin caught glimpses of movement, casual pedestrians who weren't quite casual enough, watching eyes that thought themselves hidden. The Silver Serpents were establishing a perimeter, preparing for their night's work. Amateur tradecraft. In her day, surveillance teams knew how to blend with the urban flow, how to become invisible in plain sight. "You should leave, Sifu," came another message. This one from Ming, a former student now working in Hong Kong's security services. "We have enough evidence. Let younger operators handle the cleanup." Lin smiled at the term Sifu, teacher. Ming had been one of her last trainees before she'd officially retired, before she'd chosen this quiet corner of Shanghai's fashion district for her final operation. He still didn't understand that some missions required more than evidence, more than official action. Some corruption had to be cut out at its root. A soft click drew her attention. The back door. They were earlier than expected. Lin continued her preparations, maintaining her elderly shuffle as she heard them enter, 3 sets of footsteps trying to move quietly across her workshop floor. She recognized their pattern, 2 in front, 1 covering the rear. Standard triad. Information, but executed poorly. Their breathing was too heavy, their steps too uncertain. "Madam Lin." The voice belonged to the youngest enforcer from earlier, trying to sound confident but betraying his nervousness. "We've come to continue our discussion about protection." Lin turned slowly, letting them see her trembling hands clutching her wooden box. "Please. I told Mr. Zhang I needed time to think." "Time's up, old woman." A new voice, harder, belonging to a scarred man she hadn't seen before. A professional, based on his stance. Finally, someone with real training. "The district is changing tonight. Either you change with it or—" He left the threat hanging, but Lin noted how his hand strayed to his jacket pocket. "Blade specialist," judging by the calluses visible on his fingers. Perhaps this wouldn't be as disappointing as she'd feared. I have some money saved," Lin said, holding out the wooden box with apparent hesitation. "Please take it. Leave an old woman in peace." The scarred man gestured, and the youngest enforcer stepped forward to snatch the box, just as Lin had predicted, just as she'd planned. "Check it," the scarred man ordered, his eyes never leaving Lin. There was something in his gaze now, a flicker of professional doubt, a whisper of instinct warning him that something wasn't quite right. Too late. The youngest enforcer's fingers found the hidden pressure point exactly where Lin had known they would. The box's secret compartment opened with a soft click. "What the—" The enforcer's eyes widened as he saw what lay within. Not jewelry or cash, but a single black and white photograph. An image 30 years old, showing a younger Lin Wei in military dress, surrounded by Taiwan's elite blade combat instructors. The scarred man's reaction was instantaneous. "Killer!" he shouted, reaching for his concealed weapon. But Lin was already moving. What happened next would later be described in whispered tones throughout Shanghai's criminal underworld. How an elderly seamstress moved like liquid shadow. How 3 armed men fell before they could complete their draw. How the silent thread announced her return to the game in a language written in blood and steel. But that was still to come. For now, Lin Wei's shop was about to become the first thread pulled in, unraveling the Silver Serpents' empire. And she was about to remind the criminal underworld why blade masters still taught her techniques with reverent fear. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The next 30 seconds in Lin Wei's shop became a masterclass in the art she'd spent decades perfecting. To the untrained eye, it would have appeared impossible, an elderly seamstress moving with liquid grace against three armed men, but to Lin, it was simply threading a needle with familiar precision. The youngest enforcer died, still clutching the wooden box, never seeing the hair needle that Lin had pulled from her traditional bun. A weapon so delicate, it could pass through silk without leaving a mark. So precise, it could find the carotid artery with surgical accuracy. He dropped without a sound, exactly as she'd intended. The second man managed to draw his blade, a modern tactical knife, well-maintained but held with poor form. In her prime, Lin had trained Taiwan's elite forces in 12 different blade-fighting traditions. She recognized his style, street-learned, aggressive, deadly against untrained opponents, but full of openings to someone who'd written manuals on close-quarter combat. "Impossible," he gasped as Lin stepped inside his strike, her movements so smooth it seemed almost gentle. Her scissors, ordinary textile shears to anyone else but precisely weighted in her hands, found their mark with practiced efficiency. Another silent elimination. Only the scarred man, the professional, showed proper respect for the situation. He created distance immediately, drawing a traditional butterfly sword with actual skill. His eyes had changed, showing recognition. "The silent thread," he breathed. "They said you were dead." "Many people said many things," Lin replied calmly, her voice carrying that quiet authority that had once commanded elite training facilities. "Most of them died being wrong." Through her shop windows, she caught glimpses of more movement outside. The Silver Serpents' perimeter teams had noticed something was wrong. Soon they would investigate. Perfect. Let them come. Let them see what happened when they brought violence into her domain. The scarred man attacked with precise technique. A high-line thrust designed to force her retreat, to push her into the path of reinforcements surely coming through the back door. A professional move, well executed. 20 years ago it might even have worked. But Lin had spent those 20 years perfecting her art, teaching others how to end fights before they began. She didn't retreat. Instead, she stepped forward, inside his strike zone, her movement so subtle it seemed like she hadn't moved at all. The scarred man's eyes widened as he felt the bite of steel, not where he was watching for it, but in 3 precise points along his chest. "Pressure point strikes," he gasped, recognizing the technique too late. The legends were true. "The young forget," Lin said softly as he collapsed, his nervous system shutting down from her precisely placed needle strikes. "But steel remembers." Her phone buzzed. Chen's message was urgent. "Multiple teams converging on your location. These aren't street thugs. They're moving with military precision." Lin smiled slightly as she retrieved her needles, each movement efficient and practiced. Of course they were military. The Silver Serpents were just the surface, the public face. Beneath them lay something deeper. An organization that used fashion districts to move more than counterfeit goods, that needed trained operators for more than simple extortion. She moved to her cutting table, pressing a hidden switch that revealed a compartment beneath. Inside lay tools she hadn't touched in years, specialized blades, tactical gear, communications equipment that no simple seamstress should possess. But Lin had never been simple. "Team 1, report," crackled a voice from the scarred man's radio. The speaker's accent was distinctive, not local, not even Chinese. Another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Lin changed quickly, her movements, practiced despite the years. The elderly seamstress facade melted away, replaced by something else, a shadow that had haunted Asia's underworld for decades. The silent killer who could turn any object into a weapon, who could end fights with a single precise strike. Bringing you the gift you never knew you needed, peace of mind in these uncertain times. Let us protect you and your business from unexpected problems. Her fingers found familiar grips, tested remembered edges. Each blade was an extension of her art, each weapon a tool she had mastered over decades of practice. The Silver Serpents thought they were predators, thought their military training made them invincible in these streets. They were about to learn what real predators looked like. Through her windows, she counted approaching figures, at least 12, moving in coordinated pairs. Their formation suggested formal training, their equipment speaking of serious financial backing, not just criminals now, but professional operators. Finally, opponents worthy of her full attention. Lin touched the shrine on her wall, not to a fictitious husband as everyone believed, but to her real master, the blade expert who had first shown her how to turn ordinary objects into extraordinary weapons. "Watch me, Sifu," she whispered. "Tonight, I honor your teachings." Her phone buzzed one final time. Chen's message was simple. "They've called in their elite team. These are the ones we've been waiting for. The real operators behind the Silver Serpents." Lin Wei, the legendary silent thread, allowed herself a small smile as she readied her weapons. Everything was proceeding exactly as she had planned. The Silver Serpents' elite team was about to learn why blade masters still taught her techniques, why hardened killers still whispered her name in fear. Sometimes justice needed a hidden blade, sometimes truth required a precise cut to be revealed. And the night was just beginning. Lin Wei's shop had become a tactical staging ground as she prepared to receive her uninvited guests. Through the rain-streaked windows, she watched the Silver Serpents' elite team deploy with military precision. Their movement patterns confirmed her suspicions. These weren't common criminals. Their approach spoke of formal training, specialized, equipment barely visible under civilian clothes. Satellite shows 4 more teams converging. Chen's message buzzed quietly. "They're using old PLA formations. These aren't street thugs, they're special forces." Lin completed the thought. Silently, she recognized their protocol from her years training counter-terrorism units. The Silver Serpents weren't just a criminal organization. They were a front for something far more dangerous. Just like in Bangkok, 12 years ago, when another local gang had turned out to be cover for an international weapons operation. The radio from the fallen enforcer crackled again. "Team 1, final check." The voice carried unmistakable military authority. "Capture primary target for interrogation. Terminal force authorized for all others." Lin smiled slightly as she made final adjustments to her workspace. They still thought they were hunting a simple seamstress who'd stumbled onto their operation. They hadn't realized that every aspect of her shop had been designed for this moment, every fixture carefully positioned to serve a dual purpose. Others, heavy wooden cabinets that displayed fine silks, perfect cover positions, reinforced to stop bullets. The long cutting table? Its surface was scored with precise measurements, not for fabric, but for calculating throwing distances. Even the traditional paper lanterns were strategically placed to cast misleading shadows, to create blind spots she could exploit. "External. Cameras compromised," came another message from Chen. "They're moving to cut power to the block." Lin's fingers moved across her arsenal with practiced familiarity. Throwing needles arranged by length and weight, scissors modified for perfect balance, steel measuring tape hardened to serve as a garrote. Each tool represented decades of refinement, the culmination of an art form she'd spent her life mastering. Her phone buzzed one final time. Latest intel confirms. Their second division, the ones who disappeared after the Beijing incident. That explained everything. The second division had been China's elite special operations unit until they'd officially disbanded 5 years ago. In reality, they'd gone private, selling their services to the highest bidder. Lin had suspected they were behind the Silver Serpent's surprisingly professional operation, but now she had confirmation. The power died, plunging the street into darkness. Right on schedule. Phase 1 initiated, a clipped voice announced over the radio. "All teams execute." Lin moved silently through her shop, every step placed with perfect precision. In the darkness, she was in her element. The silent thread hadn't earned her reputation by fighting fair. She'd become a legend by controlling the battlefield, by turning environments themselves into weapons. The first team breached through her back door with professional efficiency. Flashbang grenades, coordinated entry, proper corner coverage. Their technique was flawless. But Lin had spent decades teaching counter-terrorism units how to counter flawless technique. She struck before the flashbangs detonated, having anticipated their exact entry point. Her needles found gaps in body armor that only a master would know existed. 2 operators down before they realized they were under attack. Contact! The team leader's warning came too late. Lin was already moving, using the shadows cast by their own tactical lights against them. In close quarters, their military training worked against them. Too many ingrained responses, too many assumptions about how opponents should move. But Lin didn't move like a normal opponent. The silent thread flowed like water, each motion precise, economical, deadly. Her scissors opened throats with surgical accuracy. Her measuring tape wrapped around a tactical rifle, yanking it from trained hands before steel found vulnerable flesh. "Multiple men down!" The radio chatter was losing its professional edge. She's everywhere. Lin allowed herself a small smile as she retrieved her needles from fallen operators. They were learning what her former students had discovered years ago. In confined spaces, against a master of intimate blade work, superior numbers meant nothing. Each additional person just created more chaos, more opportunities for precise strikes to find their marks. Through her windows, she saw the remaining teams adjusting their approach. They were learning, adapting their tactics. Good. She'd been worried this would be disappointing. Her phone vibrated with an urgent message from Chen. Intercepted comms. They're calling in their command unit. Maximum response authorized. Perfect. The Silver Serpents were escalating exactly as she'd predicted. Soon their real leadership would have to appear, would have to take direct control of the situation, and then she'd finally see the faces behind the operation, would understand who had really been pulling the strings. Lin moved to her workbench, selecting specific blades for the next phase. Each weapon was chosen with careful purpose, each tool prepared for precise roles. The second division was about to learn why she'd been chosen to train elite units, why her techniques were still taught with reverent fear. "All teams, hold position," the radio commanded. "Command unit is en route. Maintain containment only." The rain drummed a steady rhythm on Lin Wei's shop roof as Zhang Mei and her remaining operators prepared for their final assault. Through the tactical haze of smoke and shadows, 2 generations of blade masters faced each other, teacher and student, legend and prodigy, each representing different paths taken from the same beginning. "You still favor your left side," Lin observed calmly, noting Zhang's stance. "Just like in training, some habits never truly leave us." "And you still talk too much before combat," Zhang replied, her specialized blade catching the emergency lights from outside. "But then you always like to teach, Sifu. Even now you can't help yourself." Around them, Zhang's remaining operators moved with practiced efficiency, establishing firing positions, securing angles. But both masters knew the true battle would be between them. Some conflicts required a more intimate resolution. "Last chance, old friend," Zhang offered, her voice carrying genuine respect beneath its deadly intent. "Join us. Your skills, your knowledge. Imagine what we could accomplish together. Like in Bangkok?" Lin's tone remained measured, but her hands tightened slightly on her chosen blades. "Like what you accomplished there?" Through her surveillance feeds, Lin watched MSS units continuing to establish containment positions outside. They would wait for her signal, part of the carefully choreographed endgame she'd planned. But first, there were old debts to settle. Bangkok was business, Zhang said coldly. Just like this is business. The world changed, Sifu. Power matters more than honor now. Profit more than loyalty. The world always changes, Lin replied. But some things should remain constant. Some oaths should never be broken. Zhang's attack came with explosive speed, a complex combination of strikes that would have overwhelmed any normal opponent. Her blade work showed why she'd been considered 2nd Division's finest, why even other Special Forces operators spoke her name with respect. But Lin had trained her, had helped develop many of the techniques Zhang was now employing. The silent thread flowed like water around the attacks, her own blades creating patterns that turned defense into offense, that used her opponent's strength against them. Still using the dragon's tail sequence, Lin noted as their blades clashed. But you've modified the final strike. Interesting adaptation. Around them, Zhang's operators tried to find clear shots to support their commander, but the two masters moved too quickly, their deadly dance too intimate for outside interference. This was blade work at its highest level, an art form few ever witnessed and fewer survived. You taught me to innovate, Zhang acknowledged, launching another complex series of attacks, to evolve beyond traditional forms, to find my own path. I taught you to serve, Lin corrected, her counterstrikes precise and economical, to protect, to understand that true strength comes from defending others, not exploiting them. Their blades sang through the smoke-filled air, each clash telling its own story. Lin recognized techniques she'd helped develop, saw how Zhang had modified them for her own purposes. The student had indeed become a master in her own right, but had lost something essential along the way. The world doesn't need protectors anymore, Zhang snarled, her attacks becoming more aggressive. It needs people who understand real power, who aren't afraid to use it. Like you used it in Bangkok? Lin's voice remained calm, but her blades moved with deadly purpose, against your own team, against operators who trusted you. The accusation made Zhang's rhythm falter slightly, just enough for Lin to land a precise strike that drew first blood. They were weak, Zhang spat, recovering quickly. Couldn't see the bigger picture, the real opportunities. They were loyal, Lin corrected. Remember Chen, your second in command. He contacted me before you eliminated him, showed me evidence of what you were really doing, the weapons sales, the technology transfers, the classified secrets being sold to the highest bidder. Through her tactical feeds, Lin saw Zhang's remaining operators exchanging glances. This was information they hadn't been privy to. Revelations about their own organization that made them question their loyalty. They don't know, do they? Lin pressed her advantage, both physical and psychological. Your current team doesn't know what really happened to their predecessors. How many loyal soldiers you've sacrificed for profit. Enough! Zhang launched her most deadly combination, a sequence of strikes designed to overwhelm any defense. But Lin had helped create that sequence, had trained others in how to counter it. The silent thread moved like flowing water, each motion precise and economical. Her blades found gaps in Zhang's technique that only a master would know existed. More importantly, her words found gaps in Zhang's carefully maintained control. Tell them, Mei, Lin insisted as their deadly dance continued. Tell your team. How many of their friends died for your business? How many loyal operators were eliminated because they discovered what you were really doing? Around them, Zhang's remaining operators began to move differently, their tactical positioning shifting subtly. Years of training warred with new doubts, with revelations about their own organization that couldn't be ignored. Stand fast, Zhang commanded, but her voice had lost some of its authority. She's trying to manipulate you, to turn you against, like you turned against your own people. Lin's strikes became more aggressive, pushing Zhang back, like you betrayed everything we trained for, everything we swore to protect. The legendary silent thread pressed her advantage, her blades weaving patterns that spoke of decades of mastery. But it was her words that cut deepest, truth slicing through years of deception, revelation cutting deeper than any blade. The real battle wasn't just between two masters anymore. It was between two visions of what their art should serve, what their skills should protect. And Lin Wei was about to show why some lessons could only be taught through steel. Lin checked her preparations one final time. Everything was in place. Let them come. Let them bring their elite operators, their tactical teams, their military precision. They were about to discover that true mastery wasn't about overwhelming force or superior numbers. Sometimes victory required a single perfect cut. Sometimes justice needed a blade that struck from shadows, and the silent thread was just beginning to weave her web. Rain fell steadily over Shanghai's fashion district as Lin Wei waited in. Her darkened shop, surrounded by the fallen members of the Silver Serpents' first assault team. Through the windows, tactical lights probed the darkness, searching for any sign of movement. The remaining teams had established a perimeter, waiting for their command unit to arrive. Amateur behavior. In her days training elite units, Lin had taught that containment without engagement simply gave a skilled opponent time to prepare. The 2nd Division's reputation had clearly suffered since going private. Command Unit 3. Minutes out. Chen's message buzzed. Facial recognition confirmed. Colonel Zhang Mei leading personally. Lin's hands stilled on her blades. Zhang Mei, that name carried weight in certain circles, former commander of China's most elite special operations unit, now supposedly retired. Her involvement confirmed this was far bigger than a simple protection. Racket. They're using the fashion district for more than money laundering, came another message from Ming. Found connections to restricted technology transfers, classified military hardware moving through shell companies. Of course, the Silver Serpents protection racket was just cover, their control of shipping routes masking something far more valuable. Lin had seen similar patterns in Korea, where criminal organizations provided cover for illegal weapons development. Now those same patterns were emerging here. Through her tactical surveillance setup, hidden cameras disguised as ordinary security systems, Lin watched 4 black vehicles approach her position. Their formation was perfect, their timing precise. These weren't street thugs playing it, being soldiers. These were professional operators executing a practiced protocol. The radio crackled with new authority. All teams maintain position. Colonel Zhang will handle this personally. Lin smiled slightly as she made final adjustments to her workspace. Zhang Mei's reputation preceded her. Brilliant tactician, expert in close-quarter combat, known for ending problems permanently. In another life, they might have been colleagues, might have trained together in the secret facilities where blade masters passed on their art. Instead, they would meet as opponents. Perfect. The command unit deployed with practiced efficiency, establishing additional coverage points, securing approaches. Lin counted 12 new operators, their equipment speaking of serious financial backing. Military-grade tactical gear, specialized weapons, cutting-edge communication systems, far more than any criminal organization should possess. Target is contained, one of the perimeter team leaders reported. But sir, she's not just a seamstress. We found Chen's team. The way she moved. I know exactly what she is. Zhang Mei's voice carried absolute authority. The silent thread, Taiwan's legendary blade specialist, the one who trained their elite units before disappearing. Through her surveillance, Lin watched Zhang Mei emerge from the lead vehicle. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who understood intimate combat, who knew how to read battlefields and opponents. Finally, someone worthy of her full attention. "You've lost your touch, old friend," Zhang called out, her voice carrying clearly through the rain. "The Lin Wei I knew would never have left witnesses, would never have revealed herself so openly." Lin allowed herself a small smile. Unless... That was exactly what she intended. She watched Jiang Mei process those words, saw understanding dawn in her former colleague's stance. "This is a trap," Jiang announced suddenly. "Fall back, all teams, defensive positions." But it was already too late. Lin's hidden cameras had been transmitting everything, the Second Division's tactics, their equipment, their protocols. Every moment of their response had been documented, analyzed, recorded as evidence of their operation. "Incoming!" one of the perimeter teams shouted. "Multiple vehicles approaching, police and MSS," Lin completed softly, referring to China's Ministry of State Security. "Right on schedule." Jiang Mei's composure cracked slightly as she realized the full scope of Lin's operation. This wasn't just about the Silver Serpents or their protection racket. This was about exposing the entire network, the illegal weapons trade, the technology transfers, the corruption that had turned China's elite forces into mercenaries. "You played us," Jiang said, admiration mixing with fury in her voice. "Used yourself as bait. Forced us to deploy our full operation, just like I taught your predecessors." Lin replied calmly. "The best traps are the ones the target walks into willingly." Through the rain-streaked windows, emergency lights began to appear. Police, units, MSS tactical teams, even regular army vehicles. The silent thread hadn't just been hunting criminals, she'd been gathering evidence, building a case that would expose everything. "All teams, scorched earth protocol," Jiang commanded, her voice carrying deadly purpose. "No evidence, no witnesses. Eliminate everything." Lin's hands moved across her chosen blades with practiced familiarity. Finally, the real battle could begin. Jiang Mei's elite operators against her lifetime of mastery. Military precision against perfected art. "You're not walking away from this, old friend," Jiang promised, as her teams prepared for their final assault. Lin Wei, the legendary silent thread, allowed herself one last smile as she readied her weapons. Everything had proceeded exactly as she had planned. The Silver Serpents had revealed their true nature, had exposed their entire operation, trying to eliminate one seemingly harmless seamstress. Now it was time to remind them why blade masters still spoke her name with reverent fear. Why the silent thread could cut through any web of deception. The real hunt was about to begin. The rain intensified as Jiang Mei's elite operators prepared for their final assault on Lin's shop. Through her surveillance feeds, Lin watched them deploy with practiced efficiency. Each team taking precise positions, each operator moving with the fluid grace that spoke of years of specialized training. "You're still using the Yunnan formation," Lin observed calmly through their open radio channel. "Some habits never change, old friend." Jiang's response carried a hint of amusement beneath its deadly intent. "And you still talk too much before a fight. Remember what Master Chen used to say about that? Silence is the blade's first victory." Both women quoted their old instructor simultaneously, their voices carrying the weight of shared history. Through her tactical feeds, Lin watched MSS and police units establishing outer containment positions. They would wait for her signal before moving in, part of the careful choreography she'd planned for this moment. But first, she had unfinished business with her former colleague. "Final warning thread," Jiang announced, using Lin's old operational call sign. "Surrender now. Whatever evidence you think you have, whatever case you've built, it dies here, along with anyone who tries to stop us." Lin's fingers traced the edge of a specialized blade, one of many she'd acquired during her years training elite units. "You used to understand honor, Mei. Used to believe in something beyond profit." "I believed in strength," Jiang corrected coldly. "In power, the same things I'm about to remind you of." She keyed her radio. "All teams, execute Pattern 7. No survivors." The assault began with surgical precision. Flashbangs through windows, breach charges at doors, coordinated entry from multiple points. Textbook special forces tactics, executed by operators who'd spent years perfecting their craft. But Lin had spent decades teaching counter-tactics to elite units, had trained operators specifically in how to deal with exactly this type of assault. More importantly, she'd designed her shop for this exact scenario. The first team through her front windows found their flashbangs neutralized by precisely positioned mirrors, an old trick she'd developed for close-quarter combat training. The second team's breach charge triggered hidden countermeasures, filling their entry point with smoke laced with special compounds. Custom blend, Lin explained calmly through the radio as operators began coughing, their movements becoming uncoordinated. Something I developed for Taiwan's counter-terrorism units. Non-lethal but very effective. Zhang's voice carried real anger now. Since when does the silent thread care about non-lethal? People change, Mei. Lin moved through her shop, like a shadow, her blades finding gaps in tactical gear with surgical precision. Some of us grew beyond what they taught us. Some of us remembered why we started this path. Through her surveillance, she watched Zhang process those words, saw understanding dawn in her former colleague's stance. Bangkok, Zhang said softly. This is about Bangkok, among other things. Lin disabled another operator with a precise strike, her movement so fluid it seemed almost gentle. About what happens when elite units go private, when soldiers become mercenaries, when profit matters more than honor. The remaining operators were adjusting their tactics, trying to compensate for their compromised equipment and fallen teammates. Their formation shifted, adapted, showed the expertise that had made 2nd Division legendary. But Lin had helped write the books they'd trained from, had developed many of the techniques they were using. You're still using standard counter patterns, she noted, her voice carrying that quiet authority that had once commanded training, facilities, still thinking like soldiers instead of hunters. A throwing needle found another gap in tactical armor. An operator went down silently, professionally disabled, but very much alive. Lin had meant what she said about non-lethal approaches. Some lessons needed to be taught, not eliminated. Pattern 7 isn't working, one of the team leaders reported urgently. She's anticipating every move, every counter. Of course, I am. Lin allowed herself a small smile as she disabled another attacker. I designed Pattern 7, just like I designed most of your tactical responses. Remember who trained your trainers, Mei? Zhang's composure cracked slightly. All teams fall back, regroup for... Too late, Lin interrupted softly. Through her windows, she could see MSS tactical units beginning to move. Right on schedule. Your operation is exposed, your network's compromised, your secret's about to become very public. You think exposing us changes anything? Zhang's voice carried deadly purpose. You think these bureaucrats can touch us? We own them, own the whole system. No, Mei. Lin's tone was almost gentle as she prepared for the final confrontation. You own parts of a corrupt system, but some of us remember our oaths. Remember what it means to serve something beyond profit. Through her tactical feeds, she watched Zhang gesture to her remaining operators. They formed up around her with practiced precision, elite soldiers preparing to follow their commander one last time. Then let's finish this properly. Zhang drew a specialized blade that Lin recognized, a training weapon they'd both used in their early days. One last lesson between old masters. Lin Wei, the legendary silent thread, readied her own weapons as Zhang's team prepared for their final assault. Everything had led to this moment, student against teacher, soldier against master, honor against profit. The real battle was about to begin. The clash of blades echoed through Lin's shop as two masters continued their deadly dance. Each strike carried decades of training, each movement told its own story of paths chosen and honor abandoned. Through the smoke-filled air, Lin watched Zhang's remaining operators wrestling with the revelations about their organization. "Operator Chen," Lin called out, recognizing one of the team leaders from her surveillance research. "Did they tell you what happened to your brother in Bangkok? Why he really disappeared during that training accident?" Zhang's blade work became more aggressive, trying to silence Lin before more truths could emerge. Don't listen to her manipulation, focus on the mission. But Lin had spent years gathering evidence, building a case that would cut deeper than any blade. He found evidence, didn't he? Documents about weapons sales to terrorist cells, about classified technology being sold to foreign powers. He was going to report it. Chen's tactical stance shifted slightly, his weapon lowering a fraction. "Commander Zhang told us he died in a rappelling accident, that equipment failure." "Show them, Mei," Lin challenged as their blades crossed. "Show them the files I recovered, the real mission reports, the ones that show how many accidents happened to loyal operators who ask too many questions." Through her surveillance feeds, Lin watched more MSS units taking position outside. Soon they would breach, would secure everything. But first there were truths that needed to be spoken, loyalties that needed to be tested. "Your brother contacted me before he died," Lin continued, her blade work precise and measured, just like others did, loyal soldiers who discovered what their units had become, who couldn't stay silent while their skills were sold to the highest bidder. "Commander?" Another operator's voice carried clear uncertainty. "Is this true? The Bangkok operation?" Zhang's attacks became more desperate, more aggressive. "Stand fast. She's trying to divide us, to break our unit cohesion." "Your unit cohesion?" Lin's tone carried quiet authority as she countered Zhang's strikes. "Or your control? How many of your own people have you sacrificed, Mei? How many loyal operators eliminated to protect your profits?" Through the tactical haze, Lin saw more of Zhang's team exchanging glances, their professional discipline warring with growing doubts. She pressed her advantage, both physical and psychological. "The Silver Serpents are just the surface," she explained, her blades weaving defensive patterns. "A cover for selling military secrets, for moving classified technology, for trading loyalty for profit. How many of your missions were really about protecting China, and how many were about eliminating threats to your private operation?" "Enough!" Zhang launched her most deadly combination yet, a sequence of strikes designed to end fights instantly. But her growing fury made her technique sloppy, her legendary control fracturing under the weight of exposed truths. Lin moved like flowing water, turning Zhang's aggression against her. Each counterstrike was precisely calculated, each movement designed to reveal more openings in her opponent's defense. "Tell them about Operation Ghostblade," Lin pressed, knowing the impact these words would have. "Tell them why an entire Special Forces unit suddenly disappeared during a training exercise. How much did their silence cost, Mei? How much profit was their loyalty worth?" The effect on Zhang's remaining operators was immediate. Ghostblade was legendary in Chinese Special Forces circles, an elite unit that had vanished without explanation. Now they were learning the truth, seeing their own possible futures in that revelation. "Commander Zhang," Chen's voice carried military precision but unmistakable tension. "We need answers. Those were our brothers in Ghostblade, our fellow operators." "Your brothers," Lin confirmed as she pressed her bladework advantage. "Your comrades, all eliminated because they discovered what their unit had become, what their skills were really being used for." Zhang's strikes became more desperate, more uncontrolled. "I gave you all power," she snarled. "Gave you opportunities beyond what any military salary could provide. Made you elite." "You made us mercenaries," Chen responded, his weapon now clearly lowered. "Made us betray everything we swore to protect." Through her tactical feeds, Lin saw more of Zhang's operators stepping back, their trained loyalty crumbling under the weight of revelation. The legendary commander's control was fracturing, her carefully maintained authority dissolving as truth cut deeper than any blade. "Last chance, Mei," Lin offered as their deadly dance continued. "Surrender now. Face justice for your actions, or we finish this the way we trained, with steel and skill and honor." Zhang's response was a sequence of strikes so fast they seemed to blur in the tactical lighting, but fury had made her predictable, had stripped away the precision that had once made her legendary. The silent thread moved with liquid grace, each motion exact and purposeful. Her blades found gaps in Zhang's technique that only a true master would recognize, that only decades of experience could exploit. "Your team is standing down," Lin observed calmly as more operators lowered their weapons. "They've seen the truth, recognized what you really are." Around them, the deadly dance continued, two masters pushing their art to its limits. But the real battle had already been won. Truth had cut deeper than steel, had severed bonds of loyalty that no blade could reach. The endgame was approaching, and the silent thread was about to show why some lessons could only be taught through perfect mastery of both weapon and wisdom. The tactical smoke began to clear as Lin Wei and Zhang Mei continued their lethal exchange, their blades writing ancient lessons in the air between them. Around them, Zhang's elite operators had become unwilling spectators to a duel that was about more than just physical combat. It was about the price of betrayed honor, the cost of abandoned principles. "Think carefully about your next move," Lin advised as she countered another of Zhang's increasingly desperate attacks. "Your operators are watching, learning, understanding what true mastery means." Through her surveillance feeds, Lin saw more of Zhang's team lowering their weapons. Chen, the unit leader who just learned the truth about his brother's death, had taken up a position that subtly separated him from his commander. "You were our legend," Chen said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of shattered trust. "We followed you because we believed in what you taught us. About honor, about protecting something greater than ourselves." Zhang's blade work became more aggressive, but Lin could see the fractures in her technique. Each strike carried the fury of exposed truth, the desperate energy of someone watching their carefully constructed world collapse. "I taught you to survive," Zhang snarled, launching another complex combination. "To take what power was rightfully ours, to stop serving a system that used us and discarded us." "No!" Lin countered, her movements calm and precise. "You taught them to betray everything they swore to protect, to sell their skills to the highest bidder, to become what they once fought against." Through the tactical haze, more operators were moving away from Zhang, their trained loyalty crumbling under the weight of revelation. Years of disciplined obedience warred with the understanding of what their unit had really become. "Show. And them the full truth, Mei," Lin pressed as their blades danced. "Show them the evidence I've gathered, the classified files, the mission reports, the real reason why loyal operators kept having accidents when they discovered what you were really doing." Zhang's attack pattern shifted, became more desperate. "You understand nothing. I protected them, gave them opportunities, made them elite. You made them complicit," Lin corrected, her blade work still measured and controlled. "Use their loyalty to build your criminal empire. Turned their skills toward profit instead of protection." Through her tactical feeds, Lin watched MSS, units tightening their containment position outside. Soon they would breach, would secure everything. But first, there were final lessons to be taught, final truths to be revealed. "Commander!" Another operator spoke up, his voice carrying military precision but clear uncertainty. "The Bangkok operation. Were those civilian casualties really accidents, or were they—" "Elimination of witnesses," Lin confirmed as she countered Zhang's increasingly wild strikes. just like the training accidents that claimed loyal operators who discovered the truth. Just like the equipment failures that silenced those who questioned orders. Zhang's legendary control finally shattered. "You self-righteous fool!" she screamed, her blade work becoming dangerously aggressive. "You think your honor protected anyone? Your principles? While you hid in your little shop, I built something real, something powerful." "You built a betrayal," Lin replied calmly, using Zhang's fury against her. Each counterstrike was precisely calculated, each movement designed to demonstrate the difference between mastery and mere skill. Turned loyal soldiers into mercenaries, used their trust to line your pockets. Through the tactical haze, more operators were openly backing away from their commander. The legendary Zhang Mei's carefully maintained control was dissolving, her authority crumbling as truth cut deeper than any blade. "Last opportunity," Lin offered as their deadly dance continued. "Surrender now. Face justice with what honor you have left. Show your team that something of their commander remains." Zhang's response was a sequence of strikes so fast they seemed to blur, a desperate combination that sacrificed precision for pure aggression. But Lin had helped develop those very techniques, had trained others in how to counter them. The silent thread moved like liquid shadow, each motion exact and purposeful. Her blades found gaps in Zhang's form that only a true master would recognize, that only decades of experience could exploit. "Your team has stood down," Lin observed quietly as the last operators lowered their weapons. "They've seen the truth, recognized what their unit became under your leadership." Around them, the deadly dance reached its inevitable conclusion. Zhang's fury had stripped away her technique, had reduced legendary skill to desperate striking. But Lin's mastery remained pure, her movements demonstrating why some lessons could only be taught through perfect control. "It's over, Mei," Lin said softly as she executed a precise disarming technique, one she had taught Zhang years ago. "Your empire is exposed. Your team has seen the truth. All that remains is to face the consequences of your choices." Through her surveillance feeds, Lin saw MSS units preparing for final breach. But the real victory had already been achieved. Truth had cut deeper than any blade, had severed bonds of loyalty that no weapon could reach. The silent thread had reminded everyone why true mastery was about more than just skill. It was about understanding the price of honor and being willing to pay it. With Zhang disarmed and her operators standing down, Lin Wei's shop became a study in contained tension. Through her surveillance feeds, she watched MSS tactical teams preparing for final breach, while inside, years of loyalty and deception hung. In the balance, "Secure her," Lin instructed Chen and his team, her voice carrying that quiet authority that had once commanded training facilities. "She still has tricks she hasn't revealed." As the operators moved to restrain their former commander, Lin's phone buzzed with an urgent message from her old handler. "Multiple high-level communications detected. Someone's activated emergency protocols." Perfect. The real players were finally showing themselves. "You think this ends with me?" Zhang laughed bitterly as her own operators secured her with professional efficiency. "You think exposing one unit, one operation, changes anything? We're just the surface, old friend." "Below us." "Below you is an organization that turns military units into private armies," Lin completed calmly, checking her blades. "That sells classified technology to the highest bidder. That eliminates anyone who threatens their profit margins." Through the tactical haze, she saw understanding dawn in Chen's expression. "The other training accidents," he said quietly. "The other units that had unexplained losses. This is bigger than second division, isn't it?" "Much bigger." Lin moved to her workbench, pressing hidden switches that revealed more compartments. Inside lay evidence she'd spent years gathering, documents, drives, mission reports that painted a picture of corruption spreading through elite military units worldwide. "Show them," she instructed Chen, passing him a specialized tablet. "Show your operators what their skills have really been used for, who they've really been serving." As the elite team reviewed the evidence, their professional composure cracked. Further, files detailed weapon sales to terrorist cells, classified technology transferred to foreign powers, loyal operators eliminated to protect profit margins. "These missions," another operator spoke up, his voice tight with controlled fury. "The security operations in Singapore, Manila, Bangkok, they weren't about protecting Chinese interests, were they? They were about eliminating competition." Lin confirmed as she monitored her surveillance feeds, removing rival organizations, securing smuggling routes for whoever paid the highest price. Zhang struggled against her restraints, but her legendary control had shattered completely. "You self-righteous fool! You think exposing this changes anything? The organization has contingencies, protocols for exactly this situation." As if confirming her words, Lin's tactical feeds showed new movement outside. Black vehicles with diplomatic plates were approaching, not military or MSS, but something else entirely. "Right on schedule," Lin noted calmly, making minute adjustments to her blade positions. The real masters finally showing themselves. Her phone buzzed again. This time the message was from Ming. "Facial recognition confirms. Director Zhao himself is approaching. Maximum security detail." Chen checked his own tactical feeds, his military training asserting itself. Those aren't regular security teams with him. They're movement patterns. They're like us, elite operators. Of course they are. Lin's voice carried quiet certainty as she prepared for the next phase. Director Zhao hasn't just been corrupting Chinese special forces. He's been building his own private army, recruiting from elite units worldwide. Through her surveillance system, she watched Zhao's security teams deploy with lethal precision. Their technique confirmed her suspicions. These weren't just Chinese operators. Their movement patterns spoke of training from multiple special forces traditions. "You see," Zhang's laughter held an edge of madness now. "You think your evidence matters? Your precious truth? Zhao controls everything: military contracts, intelligence operations, international security protocols." "No," Lin corrected calmly as she readied her weapons. "He controls parts of a corrupt system, but systems can be cleansed. Corruption can be cut out. All it takes is the right blade in the right place." Her phone vibrated with another urgent message from Chen. Secondary protocols activated, multiple high-level communications going dark. They're trying to erase everything. Too late. Lin smiled slightly as she watched Zhao's teams establish their positions. Everything has already been transmitted. Every file, every mission report, every piece of evidence showing how deep the corruption goes. Through the tactical haze, she saw Chen and his operators exchanging glances, making decisions that would define their future. "What's our play?" Chen asked finally, his voice carrying the weight of renewed purpose. "Now?" Lin's smile held deadly promise as she prepared to meet Zhao's elite teams. "Now we remind everyone why the silent thread became legend, why some lessons can only be taught through perfect mastery of blade and purpose." Zhang's bitter laughter cut through the tension. "You're still thinking too small, Sifu. Still believing in honor and justice. Zhao isn't just another corrupt official. He's part of something bigger, something that reaches beyond China's borders." "I know exactly what he is," Lin replied, as she made final preparations. "Just like I know exactly what's coming through that door. The question is..." She turned to Chen and his operators. "What will you do when it does? Who will you really serve?" Through her surveillance feeds, she watched Zhao's teams prepare for breach. The next phase was about to begin. A confrontation not just between operators, but between different visions of what power should serve, what skills should protect. The silent thread was about to show why true mastery was about more than just technique. It was about understanding what principles were worth dying for, and more importantly, what they were worth living for. Director Zhao's entry into Lin's shop carried all the confidence of someone unused to opposition. His security detail moved with lethal precision. Elite operators drawn from special forces units worldwide, each selected for absolute loyalty and exceptional skill. Impressive setup, Zhao noted, his cultured voice carrying subtle menace as he surveyed the scene. Using yourself as bait to expose Zhang's operation. Very elegant. Just like your recruitment program, Lin replied calmly, noting how his operators positioned themselves. Their technique confirmed her intelligence. These weren't just Chinese special forces. Their movement spoke of training from multiple military traditions, taking the best from elite units worldwide, building your own private army. Through her surveillance feeds, she watched more of Zhao's teams securing the perimeter. Their coordination was flawless, their discipline absolute. These weren't corrupt soldiers like Zhang's unit. These were true believers, convinced they served a greater purpose. We're creating something necessary, Zhao explained, his tone reasonable. A force beyond political boundaries, beyond national loyalties. Something that can maintain order in an increasingly chaotic world. By selling military secrets to terrorists, Chen challenged, his grip tightening on his weapon. By eliminating loyal operators who discover the truth. Zhao's smile was cold. Sometimes maintaining order requires getting your hands dirty. Sometimes loyalty to a higher purpose outweighs conventional morality. Lin watched his security teams continue their deployment. Their positioning was perfect, their coverage absolute. These were operators who understood true tactical superiority, who knew how to control battlefields completely. Higher purpose? Lin's voice carried quiet authority as she adjusted her grip on her chosen blades. Or higher profit? How much does loyalty cost these days, Director? How much did you pay to turn elite soldiers into mercenaries? I gave them freedom, Zhao corrected. Freedom from serving bureaucrats who waste their skills. Freedom to use their abilities without political constraints. Freedom to build something greater than national interests. Through the tactical haze, Lin saw Zhang smile bitterly. Tell them, Sifu. Tell them what their freedom really bought, what their skills are really being used for. Lin's phone buzzed with new intelligence from her network. Multiple secure facilities activating emergency protocols, Chen reported. They're trying to erase everything. Mission files, financial records, operational details. Too late, Lin noted calmly, watching Zhao's reaction. Everything has already been transmitted. Every weapons sale, every technology transfer, every eliminated witness, all of it exposed. You think exposure changes anything? Zhao's amusement seemed genuine. We control the system. The investigators, the prosecutors, the judges, all of them understand the necessity of what we've built. Do they? Lin's smile held deadly promise. Or do they just understand the price of opposing you? How many officials have had accidents when they threatened your operation? How many investigations quietly disappeared? Through her tactical feeds, she watched Zhao's operators react to her words. These weren't corrupted soldiers like Zhang's unit. These were dedicated professionals who believed they served a greater cause. Learning they were just expensive murderers would hit them differently. Your idealism is touching, Zhao said, his tone dismissive. But the world has changed. Traditional loyalty, conventional morality, these are luxuries we can no longer afford. The new order requires Requires what? Lin interrupted. Selling classified weapons to terrorist cells? Trading military secrets to the highest bidder? Eliminating anyone who threatens your profit margins. She saw the impact of her words on Zhao's teams. Even the most dedicated operators had lines they wouldn't cross, principles they wouldn't abandon. The director was revealing too much, letting his mask slip. "You're still thinking in outdated terms," Zhao replied, but his composure showed tiny cracks. "Still believing in nations, in borders, in conventional chains of command. We're building something beyond all that, something necessary." "Something corrupt," Lin corrected, her blades catching the tactical lighting. "Something that turns loyal soldiers into mercenaries, that transforms protectors into profit-driven killers." Through the smoke-filled air, she saw more of Zhao's operators exchanging glances. Their perfect discipline was fraying as truth cut through layers of deception, as they began to understand what their skills were really serving. "Last chance, Director," Lin offered, her voice carrying that quiet authority that had once commanded training facilities. "Surrender now. Face justice for your actions, or we find out if your elite teams are truly as loyal as you believe." Zhao's response was cold and precise. "Eliminate them, all of them. No witnesses, no evidence, no loose ends." But his operators hesitated. These weren't corrupted soldiers like Zhang's unit. These were professionals who had believed they served a greater purpose. Learning they were just expensive murderers had shaken that belief. "Listen carefully," Lin addressed Zhao's teams directly. "Look at the evidence. Understand what your skills have really been used for. Then decide, what do you truly serve, profit or principle?" Through her surveillance feeds, she watched the legendary discipline of Zhao's elite operators begin to crack. The silent thread had struck at something deeper than loyalty, had cut through layers of deception to expose fundamental truths. The next few moments would determine everything, not just the fate of those in the shop, but the future of what their skills would serve, what their mastery would protect. Lin Wei readied her blades as she watched truth and loyalty wage their silent battle. Sometimes the deadliest cuts weren't made with steel at all. The tension in Lin's shop crystallized as Zhao's operators wrestled with their commander's orders. Through her tactical feeds, she watched their perfect discipline waver as truth collided with training, as revelation fought against ingrained loyalty. "Still hesitating?" Zhao's voice carried deadly promise. "Remember your oaths. Remember what we built together, what we're trying to achieve. Show them exactly what they've been achieving," Lin instructed Chen, who still held the tactical tablet containing her evidence. "Show your fellow operators what their skills have really been used for." As Chen displayed the files, more of Zhao's elite teams shifted uncomfortably. Documents detailed unauthorized weapons sales, classified technology transfers, elimination of witnesses, all hidden behind a facade of maintaining global order. "These missions in North Korea," one of Zhao's senior operators spoke up, his voice tight with controlled fury. "The security operations that eliminated entire villages, those weren't terrorist camps, were they?" "They were rival weapons developers," Lin confirmed calmly. "Competing organizations that threatened your profit margins. Civilian casualties dismissed as acceptable collateral damage." Through her surveillance system, she watched Zhao's carefully maintained control begin to fracture. These weren't corrupted soldiers like Zhang's unit. These were dedicated professionals discovering their skills had been used for murder disguised as peacekeeping. "You're manipulating the evidence," Zhao accused. But his legendary composure showed cracks, taking operations out of context. These actions were necessary for what? Lin's voice carried quiet authority. "For profit, for power. How many loyal operators died believing they served a greater purpose? How many civilians eliminated to protect your margins? Her phone buzzed with urgent intelligence from her network. Multiple high-level communications detected, Ming reported. Someone's activated contingency protocols. They're trying to contain the damage. Too late, Lin noted, watching Zhao process this information. Everything has already been transmitted. Every unauthorized operation, every civilian casualty, every eliminated witness. All of it exposed to multiple intelligence agencies. You think exposure matters? Zhao's laugh held no humor. We control the system. The investigators, the prosecutors, the oversight committees. All of them understand the necessity of our work. Your work? Another of his operators challenged, lowering his weapon slightly. Or your profit margins. These files show weapons being sold to known terrorist cells. Technology transferred to hostile powers. Our own people eliminated when they discovered the truth. Lin moved with careful precision, her blades ready but not threatening. Ask yourselves, what do you really serve? What have your skills really been protecting? Look at the evidence. Understand what you've been part of. Through the tactical haze, she saw more of Zhao's teams exchanging glances. Even the most disciplined operators had lines they wouldn't cross, principles they wouldn't abandon. The director had underestimated the power of truth against conditioned loyalty. You swore oaths, Zhao reminded them, his voice hard, pledged your loyalty to something greater than conventional morality, something necessary for the new world order. We swore to protect, the senior operator corrected, his weapon now clearly lowered, to serve something greater than ourselves, not to murder civilians for profit, not to eliminate fellow operators who threatened your business interests. Lin's surveillance feeds showed more tactical teams arriving outside, but these weren't Zhao's forces. MSS units had finally moved into position, coordinating with international task forces. The endgame was approaching. Last opportunity, Lin offered, her voice carrying that quiet authority that had once commanded training facilities. Surrender now, Director. Face justice for your actions. Or watch your carefully built empire crumble as truth does what blades cannot. Zhao's response was cold and precise. Activate Protocol 0. Authorization Crimson Shadow. Several of his operators reached for hidden controls on their tactical gear, but Lin had been waiting for this. Her throwing needles found precise points in their equipment, disabling fail-safe devices before they could activate. Deadman switches, she explained calmly, designed to eliminate all evidence and all witnesses if your operation was compromised. Another lesson you forgot, Director. I helped design many of these protocols, helped train the operators who developed them. Through her tactical feeds, she watched the last of Zhao's control shatter. His elite teams had believed they served a greater purpose, had trusted their skills were being used for necessary justice. Learning they were just expensive murderers with self-destruct buttons had broken that trust completely. You understand nothing, Zhao snarled, his mask of civilization finally cracking. The world needs order, needs people willing to do whatever's necessary to maintain control. Your precious principles, your conventional morality, they're luxuries we can no longer afford. No, Lin corrected, as she readied her blades for the final confrontation. You're the one who understands nothing. True strength comes from protecting principles, not abandoning them, from serving something greater than profit or power. Around them, Zhao's legendary elite teams made their choices. One by one, operators lowered their weapons, choosing truth over conditioned loyalty, choosing principle over power. The silent thread had struck at something deeper than tactical superiority, had cut through layers of deception to expose fundamental truths. Now all that remained was to deal with those who refused to see, who chose power over principle, profit over honor. Lin Wei prepared herself as she watched Zhao's remaining loyal operators take position. Sometimes the deadliest battles weren't fought with blades at all, but with the sharp edge of truth against the soft tissue of deception. The tactical silence in Lin's shop carried the weight of spilled secrets and shattered loyalties. Through her surveillance feeds, she watched Zhao's remaining loyal operators, a hardcore of true believers who had chosen power over principle, take their final positions. "You've exposed nothing," Zhao declared, his composure cracking further as more of his elite team stood down. "Revealed nothing that wasn't necessary. The world needs people willing to do what others can't, willing to maintain order at any cost. Show them the real cost," Lin instructed Chen, who still held the tactical tablet. "Show them Operation Black Swan." The effect of those words on Zhao's remaining loyal operators was immediate. Even the most hardened among them flinched at the mention of that particular mission. Through the tactical haze, Lin saw understanding dawn in Zhang's eyes. "Black Swan," Zhang whispered. "That wasn't just about eliminating competition, was it? Those weren't just rival weapons developers." "They were our own people," Lin confirmed quietly. "Elite operators who discovered too much, who threatened to expose what their units had really become. 87 loyal soldiers eliminated in what was officially recorded as a training accident." Her phone buzzed with urgent intelligence from her network. "Multiple high-level communications detected," Ming reported. "They're activating something called Omega Protocol." Perfect. The final players were revealing themselves. "You think Black Swan was the end?" Zhao's laugh held an edge of madness now. "The limit of what we're willing to do? Omega Protocol. We'll clean everything, every witness, every piece of evidence, every trace of our operation." Through her tactical feeds, Lin watched more vehicles approaching, not military or MSS, but something else entirely. Black SUVs with diplomatic plates, carrying what appeared to be senior government officials. "Your real masters finally arriving?" Lin asked calmly, making minute adjustments to her blade positions. "The ones who authorized Black Swan, who turned elite military units into private armies." Zhao's smile was cold. "You understand nothing. We don't serve the government. We are the government. The real power behind policy, behind military decisions, behind international relations." "Show them," Lin instructed Chen again. "Show your fellow operators what Omega Protocol really means." As Chen displayed more files, the remaining loyal operators saw the truth of their organization. Documents detailed plans for eliminating entire units that might threaten their control, for using training accidents to silence any opposition within the military structure. "It's not just about profit anymore, is it?" Lin pressed as she watched their reactions. "Not just about selling weapons or classified technology. This is about control. About building a shadow government using corrupted military units as your private army." Through her surveillance system, she saw more of Zhao's remaining loyal operators processing this revelation. These weren't just mercenaries anymore. They were tools in a larger conspiracy to control China's military and political structure. "The world needs order," Zhao insisted, but his voice carried the edge of desperation now. "Needs people willing to do whatever's necessary to maintain control. Your precious principles, your conventional morality, their weaknesses we can no longer afford." "No," Lin corrected as she readied herself for what was coming. "They're the only strength that matters, the only foundation that lasts. Everything else is just power built on shifting sand." Her phone buzzed again. This time the message was from high within China's military command. "Omega Protocol confirmed. Multiple units being mobilized. They're preparing to eliminate everyone who knows too much." "You see?" Zhao's composure cracked completely. "You've forced our hand. Now everything burns. Everyone who knows, everyone who suspects, all of it cleaned away like it never existed." Through the tactical haze, Lin saw his remaining loyal operators exchange glances. Even the most dedicated among them hadn't known the full scope of what they served, hadn't understood they were just tools to be discarded when convenient. "Listen carefully," Lin addressed them directly. "Look at the evidence, understand what you've really been part of, then decide, do you die for their power or live for something better?" The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder. Through her surveillance feeds, Lin watched senior government officials begin to deploy their own security teams. The final confrontation was approaching. "Last chance, Director," she offered, her voice carrying that quiet authority that had once commanded training facilities. "Surrender now. Face justice for your actions, or watch as everything you built burns around you." Zhao's response was cold and precise. "Activate Omega Protocol Authorization Shadow Crown." But his remaining operators had seen too much, had learned too many bitter truths. One by one, they lowered their weapons, choosing survival over dying for someone else's power. "You understand nothing about loyalty," Zhao snarled as his last support crumbled. "About what's necessary to maintain order." "No," Lin corrected as she prepared for the final phase. "You're the one who never understood. True loyalty comes from serving principles, not power, from protecting something greater than profit or control." Through her tactical feeds, she watched the government vehicles establish their perimeter. The real masters of this shadow empire were approaching, bringing with them the full weight of corrupted authority. But the silent thread had cut deeper than they knew, had severed bonds of loyalty that no power could repair. Now all that remained was to show why some lessons could only be taught through perfect mastery of both blade and truth. The arrival of Vice Minister Lin Wei at Lin's shop carried all the weight of absolute authority. His security detail moved with mechanical precision, not military operators or police, but something else entirely. Through her tactical feeds, Lin watched them deploy with a level of coordination that spoke of extensive conditioning rather than traditional training. "Impressive operation," Lin Wei noted, his cultured voice carrying subtle menace as he surveyed the scene. "Using yourself as bait to expose our network, almost elegant, if ultimately futile." "Like your conditioning program?" Lin replied, uncalmly, noting how his security teams positioned themselves. Their movements confirmed her worst suspicions. These weren't normal operators. Their synchronization was too perfect, their responses too uniform. Taking loyal soldiers and turning them into something else entirely. Through her surveillance system, she watched more of Lin Wei's teams secure the perimeter. Their coordination went beyond military precision into something almost inhuman. These weren't corrupted soldiers like Zhang's unit, or true believers like Zhao's teams. These were something new. "We're creating the future," Lin Wei explained, his tone reasonable but his eyes cold. "A force beyond human weakness, beyond question or doubt. Perfect loyalty through perfect control." "Mind control experiments," Lin stated flatly, watching. His security teams continue their deployment. That's what the classified technology transfers were really funding. Not just weapons or military secrets, but research into controlling human consciousness. Zhao's bitter laugh cut through the tension. "Tell them, Vice Minister, tell them what really happened to the test subjects, to the loyal soldiers who volunteered for advanced training programs." Lin's phone buzzed with urgent intelligence from her network. "Multiple secure facilities activated," Ming reported. "Medical facilities disguised as training centers. They're trying to eliminate evidence of the program." "Too late," Lin noted, watching Chen Wei's reaction. Everything has already been documented. Every experiment, every test subject, every failed conditioning attempt, all of it exposed. You think exposure matters? Chen Wei's smile was empty of humanity. We're beyond conventional authority now, beyond traditional power structures. We're creating perfect soldiers, perfect loyalty through chemical and psychological conditioning. Through the tactical haze, Lin saw understanding dawn in the faces of Zhao's remaining operators. The truth of what they might have become, what their loyalty might have cost them, was finally clear. Show them, Lin instructed Chen, who still held the tactical tablet. Show them what happens to the test subjects who resist conditioning, who maintain their humanity despite the procedures. As more files displayed on screen, even the hardened operators looked sick. Medical reports detailed failed experiments, subjects whose minds had been destroyed by attempted conditioning, loyal soldiers reduced to empty shells. "You're insane," Zhang whispered, her former arrogance replaced by genuine horror. "This isn't about power or profit anymore. This is about destroying everything that makes us human." "Humanity is weakness," Chen Wei corrected coldly. "Conscience is weakness. Perfect soldiers require perfect control. No questions, no doubt, no resistance to necessary action." Lin watched his security teams through her surveillance feeds. Their movements were synchronized beyond natural possibility, their responses programmed rather than trained. These weren't soldiers anymore. They were prototypes of what the Vice Minister wanted to create. "Last chance," Lin offered, her voice carrying that quiet authority that had once commanded training facilities. "Surrender now. Face justice for your actions, or watch as humanity itself rises against what you've tried to create." Chen Wei's response was chilling in its emptiness. "Initiate final protocol, authorization, mind crown." His security teams moved with perfect synchronization, drawing weapons with mechanical precision. But Lin had been waiting for this moment, had prepared for exactly this type of threat. "Now," she commanded quietly. Around the shop, hidden, systems activated. Electronic pulses designed to disrupt neural conditioning filled the air. Chen Wei's perfect soldiers stumbled, their programmed responses disrupted by carefully calibrated frequencies. "Impossible!" the Vice Minister snarled, his composed mask cracking. "These frequencies are classified. The research was contained." "Nah, I had help," Lin replied calmly, watching his security teams struggle against their conditioning. "From others who discovered your program, who chose humanity over perfect control." Through her tactical feeds, she watched more vehicles approaching. But these weren't government officials or security teams. These were medical transport units carrying specialists in deprogramming and neural recovery. "It's over," Lin announced, as Chen Wei's perfect soldiers began to break free of their conditioning. "Your program exposed, your research documented, your test subjects being freed, all of it ending." "You understand nothing," Chen Wei's voice carried genuine madness now. "Humanity is chaos. Free will is weakness. Only perfect control brings perfect order." "No," Lin corrected as she prepared for the final confrontation. "You're the one who never understood. True strength comes from choosing to serve, not being forced to obey, from maintaining humanity despite the cost." Around them, the Vice Minister's conditioned operators fought against their programming, struggled to reclaim their stolen humanity. The silent thread had cut deeper than flesh or loyalty, had severed the bonds of artificial control itself. Lin Wei readied her blades as she watched Chen Wei reach for his own weapon. The final battle wouldn't just be for survival or justice. It would be for humanity itself, for the right to choose what to serve, what to protect, what to believe. Sometimes the deepest cuts had to strike at the heart of what made us human, and the silent thread was about to show why some choices had to be made with free will, not perfect control. The tactical space in Lin's shop had become a battlefield of wills as Chen Wei's conditioned operators fought against their programming. Through her surveillance feeds, she watched the perfect synchronization of their movements begin to fracture, saw humanity starting to break through artificial control. "Fascinating, isn't it?" Chen Wei observed, his voice clinical despite the chaos. "How they struggle against perfection, against the removal of human weakness. Even now, they fight to reclaim their flaws." "They fight to reclaim themselves," Lin corrected, watching his security teams through new eyes. Each operator's struggle was unique now, individual humanity asserting itself against programmed uniformity. "To reclaim what you stole from them." Her phone buzzed with urgent intelligence from her network. "Multiple medical facilities breached," Ming reported. "More test subjects being found. The scale of this program. It's beyond anything we imagined." "Of course it is." Chen Wei's smile was empty of warmth. "You think small. Think in terms of individual soldiers, individual units. We're reshaping humanity itself, creating perfect loyalty on a global scale." Through the tactical haze, Lin saw horror dawn in Zhang's eyes. "The weapons sales," she whispered. "The technology transfers. They weren't just for profit, they were funding this, funding the spread of your conditioning program worldwide." "Show them," Lin instructed Chen, who still held the tactical tablet. "Show them phase 2 of the program, what they plan to do with their perfect soldiers once they had enough of them." As more files displayed, even the hardened operators looked sick. Documents detailed plans for systematic replacement of military and police forces worldwide, for creating a global network of conditioned humans who would enforce perfect order through perfect obedience. "You're not just destroying individual soldiers," Lin stated flatly, watching Chen Wei's remaining loyal operators process this revelation. "You're trying to destroy free will itself, to replace human choice with programmed response." "Free will is chaos," Chen Wei replied, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "Individual choice leads to disorder. Only through perfect control can we achieve perfect peace." Through her surveillance system, she watched more of his security teams fighting against their conditioning. The electronic pulses were working, helping break through the programming, but each operator's struggle was intensely personal. "Humanity isn't weakness," Lin declared as she readied her blades. "Choice isn't chaos. Real strength comes from deciding what to serve, not being forced to obey." Her phone buzzed again. This time the message was from international medical authorities. "Conditioning program confirmed in multiple countries. Recovery teams mobilizing worldwide." "You see?" Chen Wei's composure cracked slightly. "It's already too late. The program has spread beyond your reach. Perfect control is inevitable." But Lin noticed something he didn't, how his security teams were responding to his words. As their conditioning weakened, as humanity reasserted itself, they were beginning to see their controller for what he really was. "Listen to yourselves," she addressed them directly. "Feel your own thoughts returning, your own choices. Remember who you were before they tried to make you perfect." Through the tactical haze, she watched individual personalities emerge, saw unique movements replace programmed responses. The silent thread was cutting deeper than flesh now, was helping sever the bonds of artificial control itself. "Impossible," Chen Wei snarled as his perfect soldiers began truly breaking free. "The conditioning is absolute, the control perfect." "Nothing human is perfect," Lin corrected as she moved with deadly grace. "That's our strength, not our weakness. Our choices make us who we are." Around them, more of his security teams were awakening to their own humanity. The struggle was visible in their movements, in the way programmed precision gave way to individual technique. "Last chance," Lin offered, her voice carrying that quiet, Authority that had once commanded training facilities, surrender now. Face justice for your attempts to destroy human will itself. Chen Wei's response was cold and precise. Initiate terminal protocol, authorization, crown fall. But his security teams were too far gone, too close to reclaiming themselves. Instead of responding with programmed obedience, they began actively fighting against remaining control. You never understood, Lin said softly as she watched humanity triumph over conditioning. Real loyalty can't be programmed. Real strength can't be forced. It has to be chosen. Through her tactical feeds, she watched more medical units arriving, bringing specialists in neural recovery and psychological deprogramming. The rescue phase was beginning, even as the final confrontation approached. If I can't have perfect control, Chen Wei's voice carried genuine madness now, then no one has control. Activate final failsafe. Authorization, mind death. But Lin had been waiting for this too. Her throwing needles found precise points in his tactical gear, disabling hidden controls before they could activate. Did you really think we wouldn't find the kill switches? She asked quietly. The programmed suicide protocols? We found it all, disabled it all. Your perfect control is ending. Around them, the vice minister's formerly conditioned operators stood free, humanity restored, looking at their controller with new and dangerous understanding. The silent thread had cut through more than flesh or loyalty, had helped sever the bonds of artificial control itself. Lin Wei readied herself as she watched Chen Wei reach for his own weapon. The final battle wouldn't just be for justice or survival. It would be for the right to choose, to feel, to be imperfectly human. Sometimes the deepest cuts had to strike at the heart of what made us who we are. And the silent thread was about to show why humanity's greatest strength was its ability to choose what to serve, what to protect, what to believe. Chen Wei's attack came with inhuman precision, a combination of strikes that moved beyond normal human capability into something artificially enhanced. Through her surveillance feeds, Lin saw his remaining loyal operators realize the truth. Their controller had undergone his own modifications. Impressed, Chen Wei's movements carried unnatural fluidity as Lin evaded his initial assault. Perfect. Control begins with perfect self-modification. No hesitation, no human weakness, no moral uncertainty. No humanity, Lin corrected, as she analyzed his technique. His strikes were flawless, each movement mathematically precise, but they lacked something essential. No ability to adapt or create, just programmed responses, no matter how perfect. Through the tactical haze, she watched his formerly controlled operators completing their return to humanity. Each one's awakening was unique, individual personality reasserting itself over programmed uniformity. Look at them, Chen Wei sneered as he launched another precisely calculated sequence. Struggling to reclaim their flaws, their weaknesses, their chaotic individuality, their humanity, Lin countered, her own movements flowing like water around his mechanical precision. Their right to choose, their ability to be more than programs in human form. Her phone buzzed with urgent updates from her network. Medical teams reporting worldwide, Ming's message reported. More conditioning facilities found, more victims being freed. The scale of this. Show them, Lin instructed Chen, who still held the tactical tablet while covering the confrontation. Show them what perfect control really looks like. Show them their controller's own modifications. As medical files displayed on screen, even the hardened operators looked disturbed. Documents detailed Chen Wei's voluntary transformation, neural modifications, chemical enhancement, psychological conditioning that had stripped away human limitations along with human conscience. "You're not even human anymore," Zhang whispered, watching her former superior move with artificial grace. You're just a program in human shape, a machine playing at being alive. I am perfection, Chen Wei replied, his voice carrying empty certainty, beyond human weakness, beyond moral limitation, beyond the chaos of individual choice. Lin moved like flowing shadow, her technique adapting to his patterns, finding gaps in his mathematical precision. Perfect technique isn't mastery, she explained, as their deadly dance continued. Real skill comes from understanding imperfection, from choosing how to overcome it. Through her surveillance system, she watched more medical units arriving outside, teams specialized in treating victims of neural modification and psychological conditioning. But first, there was one last lesson, to teach about the difference between perfect control and true mastery. Your technique is flawless, Lin acknowledged, as she counted another precisely calculated sequence. Every angle perfect, every strike mathematically optimal. But that's your weakness. Weakness? Chen Wei's enhanced speed launched attacks faster than normal human reaction time. I have moved beyond weakness, beyond human limitation. Beyond human strength, Lin corrected as she flowed around his mechanical precision. Beyond the ability to adapt, to create, to choose something. Beyond programmed response. Her blade work demonstrated the truth of her words. Where his attacks were perfectly calculated, hers were intentionally varied. Where his technique sought mathematical optimization, hers embraced human intuition and creative response. Impossible, he snarled as she countered attacks that should have been unstoppable. My calculations are perfect, my technique flawless. Perfect technique isn't everything, Lin explained as she began landing her own strikes. True mastery comes from understanding imperfection, from choosing how to overcome it. Through the tactical haze, his formerly controlled operators watched with growing understanding. They had been intended to become like him, perfect, programmed, empty of real choice or human complexity. Your programming is your prison, Linny continued as their deadly dance approached its conclusion. Your perfect control traps you in predictable patterns, in responses that can be anticipated because they can't adapt. Her blades found gaps in his mathematically optimal defense, not through superior technique, but through human creativity and chosen response. The silent thread demonstrated why true mastery required more than perfect control. Last chance, Lin offered, her voice carrying that quiet authority that had once commanded training facilities. Surrender now. Let the medical teams help you reclaim your humanity. Chen Wei's response was cold and precise. Perfection requires no humanity, requires no choice or moral uncertainty, but his perfect technique was failing against her adaptive response. His programmed patterns could not match her chosen variations. His mathematical optimization could not counter human creativity and willed action. You never understood, Lin said softly, as she moved inside his perfect defense. Real strength isn't about eliminating choice. It's about choosing well despite imperfection, about maintaining humanity despite the cost. Her final strikes were precisely calculated not for mathematical perfection, but for human necessity. The silent thread demonstrated why true mastery required more than programmed response, required the wisdom to choose what to protect, what to serve, what to be. Around them, the formerly controlled operators watched their controller fall, understanding, finally complete. They had been intended to become like him, perfect, empty, devoid of real choice. Instead, they had reclaimed their humanity, had chosen to be imperfectly, powerfully human. Lin Wei stood over Chen Wei's unconscious form as medical teams approached. The final battle hadn't just been about technique or survival. It had been about the right to choose, to feel, to be something more than programmed perfection. Sometimes the deepest wisdom came from embracing imperfection, and the silent thread had shown why humanity's greatest strength was its ability to choose what to master, what to protect, what to become. The rain had finally stopped over Shanghai's fashion district as medical teams worked to secure Chen Wei and begin treating his victims. Through her surveillance feeds, Lin Wei watched individual personalities continue to emerge among the formerly controlled operators, each awakening unique, each return to humanity distinctly personal. Recovery teams reporting from worldwide facilities, Ming's message buzzed. Thousands of victims identified. The conditioning program, it reached further than anyone imagined. Of course it did, Zhang said quietly from where medical staff were examining her. Perfect control was never meant to stay contained. They wanted to reshape humanity itself, to make everyone as empty as Chen Wei. Lin moved through her shop with practiced efficiency, securing evidence while medical teams worked. Each blade was carefully cleaned and stored, each weapon returned to its hidden place. The silent thread was preparing to fade back into shadow. The international task force is deploying worldwide, Chen reported, monitoring tactical feeds, military facilities, research centers, hidden conditioning sites, all of them being exposed and shut down. Through the tactical haze, Lin watched more of Chen Wei's victims receiving treatment. Each recovery was different, each return to free will marked by individual choices and personal struggles, humanity reasserting itself in all its beautiful imperfection. What happens to us? One of the formerly controlled operators asked, his voice carrying new uncertainty. How do we live with what we almost became? You choose, Lin replied simply, her voice carrying that quiet authority that had once commanded training facilities. That's what makes you human. Not perfect control, not programmed response, but the ability to choose who you become. Her phone buzzed with updates from international authorities. Multiple high-level arrests confirmed, the message read. Government officials, military commanders, research directors, all connected to the conditioning program. The whole network exposed. It's really over? Zhang asked, watching medical teams prepare Chen Wei for secure transport. Everything we built, everything we thought we were serving. The Shadow Empire is finished, Lin confirmed as she made final checks of her surveillance system. The conditioning program exposed, the network dismantled. All that remains is helping the victims recover. Through her tactical feeds, she watched more medical units arriving, specialists in neural recovery, experts in psychological deprogramming, teams dedicated to helping people reclaim their stolen humanity. But the real work is just beginning. She continued, addressing the recovering operators, learning to live with choice again, learning to be human in all its imperfect complexity. One of the medical team leaders approached, her manner professional but gentle. Early results are promising, she reported. The conditioning appears reversible. With time and proper treatment, most victims should recover fully. Not just recover, Lin corrected softly. Choose who they want to become. That's the real victory here, not just ending the program, but restoring the right to choose. Through the tactical haze, she saw understanding dawn in the faces of Chen Wei's victims. They weren't just being freed from control, they were being given back their essential humanity, their right to decide their own paths. What about you? Chen asked, as international authorities began securing the scene. After exposing everything, after bringing down their whole network, the silent thread returns to shadow. Lin replied calmly as she prepared to depart. There are always more secrets to expose, more justice to serve, more choices to protect. Her phone buzzed one final time. A message from her old handler in Taiwan. Well done, old friend. The world may never know everything you accomplished here, but those who matter will remember. They don't need to know, Lin said softly as she watched medical teams continuing their work. They just need to be free to choose, to be imperfectly, powerfully human. Through her surveillance feeds, she saw more victims being transported to treatment facilities. Each one would face their own journey back to humanity, their own struggle to reclaim individual will. But they would face it by choice now, not by programming. For those who want to serve again, she addressed the recovering operators, there are legitimate units that would welcome your skills. For those who want different paths, that choice is yours now. That's what we fought for. Here, the right to decide. Around her shop, international teams continued securing evidence and preparing prisoners for transport. The Shadow Empire had fallen, its perfect control shattered by imperfect humanity choosing to resist. The Seamstress shop? Chen asked as Lin made final preparations to disappear. Will you maintain your cover here? Lin smiled slightly as she surveyed her carefully crafted workspace. Perhaps. There are always more shadows needing light, more justice needing to be threaded through darkness. Through the tactical haze, she watched the last of Chen Wei's victims being treated. Each one represented not just a life saved, but a future restored, the right to choose rebuilt from programmed rubble. Remember, she told them as she prepared to fade into shadow, true strength isn't about perfect control. It's about choosing well despite imperfection, about maintaining humanity despite the cost. The silent thread had shown why some battles required more than perfect technique, required the wisdom to choose what to protect, what to serve, what to become. Now it was time to let others choose their own paths, write their own stories, thread their own justice through darkness. Sometimes the deepest victories came not from perfect control, but from the right to be imperfectly human. And Lin Wei had helped restore that right to those who needed it most. 1 month after Chen Wei's fall, Lin Wei stood in her restored shop, carefully stitching a delicate silk garment. Through her surveillance feeds, still maintained despite the apparent return to normalcy, she monitored the lasting impact of the Shadow Empire's collapse. Recovery statistics updated. Ming's message buzzed quietly. 87% of identified victims now successfully deprogrammed. Individual personalities fully restored, the human spirit proved stronger than perfect control. Lin smiled slightly as she completed another precise stitch. Her cover as a master seamstress had never really been a cover at all, just another expression of the same dedication to perfect technique in service of human need. International Task Force confirms final numbers, Chen reported through secured channels. 312 facilities exposed worldwide, 2,700 victims identified and freed, the entire network dismantled. Through her shop windows, she watched daily life return to Shanghai's fashion district, merchants reopening without fear, customers browsing without tension, a community rebuilding itself in the aftermath of exposed corruption. You were right. Zhang's message appeared, her former adversary now cooperating fully with authorities. Real strength isn't about perfect control. It's about choosing what to serve, what to protect. I understand that now. Lin continued her careful stitching as she monitored the broader implications of their victory. The Shadow Empire's fall had triggered worldwide changes. Military units reformed, corruption exposed, power structures rebuilt on foundations of choice rather than control. Some of your former students send regards, her old handler in Taiwan reported. The ones you helped free from conditioning, they're choosing their own paths now, some returning to service, others building new lives, all of them grateful for the right to decide. Through her tactical feeds, she watched the last traces of Chen Wei's network being systematically dismantled, evidence secured, conspirators arrested, victims freed to reclaim their stolen humanity. The silent thread's work had cut deeper than anyone expected. The medical team's report ongoing success came another update from Ming. Each recovery unique, each return to free will marked by individual choice, humanity reasserting itself in all its beautiful imperfection. Lin moved through her shop with practiced grace, every motion precise but chosen rather than programmed. The skills that had made her legendary served equally well in this quieter role, creating beauty instead of dealing death, mending rather than cutting. "They're still telling stories," Chen noted in his latest report, in military circles, in intelligence communities, about the silent thread, about how true mastery comes from choice, not control, about maintaining humanity despite the cost. A customer entered, an elderly woman seeking alterations to a cherished garment. Lin served her with the same precise attention she'd once given to military operations. Excellence wasn't about perfect control. It was about choosing to serve, well in whatever role life presented. "The international authorities want to acknowledge your role," her old handler suggested. "To recognize what you accomplished, the networks exposed, the lives saved, the humanity restored." "No need," Lin replied simply as she returned to her stitching. "The victory isn't about recognition, it's about choice restored, humanity preserved, justice served in shadow." Through her surveillance system, she monitored the lasting changes their victory had triggered. Military units reformed with emphasis on ethical choice rather than blind obedience. Intelligence services rebuilt around principles of justified action rather than mere efficiency. Power structures transformed by understanding that true strength came from chosen service rather than perfect control. "For those who want to learn," she wrote to her former students now freed from conditioning, "there are still lessons to be taught. Not just about technique, but about choice, about serving something greater than ourselves while maintaining our essential humanity." The afternoon sun painted patterns through her shop windows as Lin continued her work. Each stitch precise but chosen, each movement exact but freely willed. The silent thread had shown why true mastery required more than perfect control, required the wisdom to choose what to protect, what to serve, what to become. "There will always be more shadows," she acknowledged in her final report to international authorities. "More corruption needing exposure, more justice needing to be served, more humanity needing to be protected. But there will also always be those who choose to resist, to fight, to maintain their essential humanity despite the cost." Through the gathering dusk, Lin Wei completed her day's work with the same dedication she'd once given to military operations. The legendary silent thread had faded back into shadow, but her impact remained, in lives restored, in choices protected, in humanity preserved against the temptation of perfect control. Sometimes the deepest victories came not from perfect technique, but from the wisdom to choose what truly mattered. And Lin Wei had helped restore that right of choice to those who needed it most, had helped preserve humanity's beautiful imperfection against the cold efficiency of programmed response. The shop's closing rituals complete, Lin smiled slightly as she prepared for whatever tomorrow might bring. There would always be more shadows needing light, more justice needing to be threaded through darkness. But for now, in this moment, she had chosen her path, had shown why true mastery required more than perfect control, required the wisdom to choose what to serve, what to protect, what to become. The silent thread had completed her most important work, not just exposing corruption or defeating enemies, but preserving the essential human right to choose, to be imperfectly, powerfully, beautifully human. And that was a victory worth any cost. 6 months after Chen Wei's fall, a young officer stood outside Lin Wei's shop, hesitating before entering. Through her surveillance feeds, Lin recognized him, one of the formerly controlled operators, now restored to full humanity and serving in China's reformed military forces. "Master Lin," he greeted her with respectful uncertainty. We wanted you to know what's happened since that night, what your actions really accomplished." Lin continued her precise stitching as she gestured for him to continue. The afternoon sun painted shadows through her shop windows, reminiscent of other shadows she'd helped dispel. "The military has been completely reorganized," he reported. "New emphasis on ethical choice-making, on maintaining humanity while serving greater purpose. Your lessons about true mastery versus mere control, they're being taught in command schools now." Through her tactical feeds, still maintained despite apparent retirement, Lin monitored the broader changes their victory had triggered. Military units worldwide reformed around principles of chosen service rather than blind obedience. Intelligence. Services rebuilt with emphasis on justified action rather than mere efficiency. "The conditioning victims," the young officer continued, watching her careful work. "All of us who were freed, we've formed a support network, helping each other, reclaim our humanity, choose our own paths. Some returned to service, others found new lives. But all of us remember what you taught us about the importance of choice." Lin smiled slightly as she completed another perfect stitch. "And what choice did you make?" she asked quietly. "I joined the new Special Operations Ethics Division," he replied, "teaching others what we learned, about maintaining humanity while serving greater purpose, about choosing well despite imperfection." Her phone buzzed with updated intelligence. In from her network. "Final statistics confirmed," Ming reported. "Chen Wei's entire shadow empire dismantled, all conditioning facilities exposed. All victims either recovered or in treatment. The system you helped expose has been completely transformed." "They still tell stories," the young officer noted, watching her work. "In military circles, in intelligence communities, about the silent thread, about how true mastery comes from choice, not control, about preserving humanity despite the cost." Lin moved through her shop with practiced grace, every motion precise but chosen rather than programmed. The skills that had made her legendary served equally well in this quieter role, creating beauty instead of dealing death, mending rather than cutting. "The international authorities still want to acknowledge you formally," he added, "to recognize what you accomplished, the networks exposed, the lives saved, the humanity restored." "No need," Lin replied simply as she selected another length of silk. "The victory isn't about recognition. It's about choice protected, humanity preserved, justice served in shadow." Through her surveillance system, she monitored the lasting impact of their success. Power structures transformed by understanding that true strength came from chosen service rather than perfect control. Training programs rebuilt around principles of ethical choice-making rather than mere efficiency. "Zhang asked me to deliver a message," the officer said carefully. "She's completed her rehabilitation, chosen to help others recover from conditioning, says she finally understands what you tried to teach her years ago, about serving something greater than ourselves while maintaining our essential humanity." Lin nodded slightly as she continued her work. Each stitch precise but chosen, each movement exact but freely willed. The silent thread had shown why true mastery required more than perfect control, required the wisdom to choose what to protect, what to serve, what to become. "There will always be more shadows," she acknowledged quietly, "more corruption needing exposure, more justice needing to be served, more humanity needing to be protected. But there will also always be those who choose to resist, to fight, to maintain their essential humanity, despite the cost." The young officer watched her work in respectful silence, understanding that her current role was as much a calling as her legendary past. Excellence wasn't about perfect control. It was about choosing to serve well in whatever path life presented. "Thank you," he said finally, preparing to leave. "Not just for freeing us from control, but for showing us why freedom matters, why choice matters, why being imperfectly human matters." Lin smiled slightly as she completed her final stitch. The legendary silent thread had faded back into shadow, but her impact remained, in lives restored, in choices protected, in humanity, preserved against the temptation of perfect control. Sometimes the deepest victories came not from perfect technique, but from the wisdom to choose what truly mattered. And Lin Wei had helped restore that right of choice to those who needed it most, had helped preserve humanity's beautiful imperfection against the cold efficiency of programmed response. As evening shadows lengthened across her shop floor, Lin prepared for whatever tomorrow might bring. There would always be more shadows needing light, more justice needing to be threaded through darkness. But for now, in this moment, she had chosen her path, had shown why true mastery required more than perfect control, required the wisdom to choose what to serve, what to protect, what to become. The silent thread had completed her most important work, not just exposing corruption or defeating enemies, but preserving the essential human right to choose, to be imperfectly, powerfully, beautifully human. And that legacy would endure long, after the legend faded into shadow. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.